It was a bright morning in a small, bustling village market, the kind of morning that painted everything in a soft, golden hue. The sun had just climbed above the rows of tin roofs and thatched huts, spilling its warmth over the cobblestone streets. Vendors were already shouting prices, their voices blending into a musical chaos, the rhythm of daily life. The air was thick with the smell of spices, roasted corn, and freshly cut fruit. Children ran past with laughter that echoed through the narrow lanes, and the bells of passing bicycles added their metallic chime to the village's morning symphony. Amid the lively crowd walked a boy named Eli, no more than 12 years old. His steps were light but careful, his bare feet brushing against the warm earth. Each stride left a faint print on the dusty path, the mark of someone unnoticed yet quietly enduring. His clothes hung loosely on his thin frame, torn and faded from years of wear. The once white shirt was now a patchwork of stains, and the shorts he wore were frayed at the edges. But what truly set Eli apart were his eyes, bright, unyielding, and filled with a kind of hope that poverty could not extinguish. Eli clutched a small, empty cloth bag close to his chest as he moved through the maze of stalls. He passed piles of gleaming red apples, hand-woven jewelry glinting in the sunlight, and colorful toys that spun and danced in the hands of other children. The scent of sweet sugarcane tempted him, but he turned away quickly, reminding himself of his purpose. He wasn't there to buy, he had nothing to offer in return. Instead, he was searching. For work, for food, for a chance, or perhaps for a kind soul who might see beyond his tattered clothes and weary face. Some vendors noticed him. A few looked at his bare feet and sighed with pity. Others frowned, suspicious that he might beg or steal. Eli met neither reaction with anger nor shame. He had grown used to those glances, the silent judgments that followed him like a shadow. What he carried inside, however, was something few could see, a quiet determination, born from nights of hunger and days of struggle that whispered to him, "Keep walking. Don't stop." The market buzzed around him, a living world of color and sound, yet Eli moved through it as if on a different path, slower, softer, searching. A dog barked near a meat stall, a woman haggled loudly over the price of rice, and still Eli's small figure pressed forward, his eyes scanning faces, signs, doors, anything that might hold an opportunity. And then, as the camera of life seemed to slow its motion, the narration rose softly, carrying a truth that lingered in the air like a prayer. Sometimes, the poorest hearts carry the richest hopes. In that moment, the bustling market faded into a blur, and all that remained was Eli, a boy walking barefoot through a world that rarely looked down to see him, yet whose heart carried dreams far bigger than the dust beneath his feet. The sun had climbed higher now, its warmth mixing with the dry dust that danced in the air. The village market was alive with noise, vendors shouting, donkeys braying, and the clatter of pots echoing from food stalls. For most, it was a day of trade and laughter, but for Eli, it was another day of searching, not for comfort, but for a chance. He moved from stall to stall, his small figure weaving between baskets of vegetables and wooden carts stacked high with grains. Each time he stopped, he spoke softly, his voice polite but hopeful. "Sir, can I carry your goods?" he asked a man unloading sacks of onions. The vendor glanced down at him, frowned, and shook his head. "Go away, boy. I don't need trouble." Eli nodded, forcing a smile, and stepped aside. He tried again at another stall, where a woman was arranging bright oranges into neat piles. "I can help you clean, ma'am," he offered. "I can sweep the floor." She didn't even look up. "No work here, boy," she muttered, busying herself with her customers. He kept walking. His voice grew softer with every attempt, yet he didn't stop. Somewhere inside him, he believed that kindness still existed, that someone would see his effort and give him a chance. Near the corner of the market, he approached a fruit seller with a thick mustache and a booming voice. The man laughed as Eli spoke. "Work? You?" he said mockingly. "Come back when you can afford shoes, boy. Maybe then I'll believe you're worth something." Laughter burst from the nearby stalls. Eli lowered his eyes, the sting of embarrassment burning behind them. He turned away quietly, his dusty feet carrying him toward the next stall, where the smell of fresh tea drifted through the air. At a small tea stall shaded by an old banyan tree, a woman noticed him. Her eyes softened as she watched him standing there, thin, tired, and trying to hide his hunger. Without a word, she poured a small cup of tea and slid it toward him. "Here, Beta," she said gently. "It's warm. Drink it." Eli hesitated, his hands trembling slightly as he accepted it. "Thank you, ma'am," he whispered, his voice barely audible. But before he could take a sip, a loud voice snapped through the moment. The owner of the stall, a heavy-set man with a towel around his neck, stormed over. "What are you doing?" he barked at the woman. "We don't serve beggars here." The woman froze, her kind expression faltering. Eli quickly set the cup down, bowing his head. "I'm sorry," he said softly. "I didn't mean to go," the owner shouted, waving his hand. Eli stepped back and hurried away, the sound of laughter and scolding fading behind him. The warmth that had briefly touched his heart vanished, replaced by the ache of hunger twisting in his stomach. He wandered to the edge of the market and found a large neem tree that offered a patch of shade. There he sat on the ground, clutching his empty bag. His stomach rumbled as he watched a group of children his age, clean, cheerful, their pockets jingling with coins. They crowded around a toy stall, pointing and laughing, buying sweets wrapped in colored paper. Eli smiled faintly, though his eyes glistened. He wasn't jealous, and just longing for a day when he wouldn't have to look at food as a dream or kindness as a miracle. He picked up a small pebble and rolled it between his fingers, lost in thought. The world moved on without him. Merchants arguing, customers bargaining, and he wondered quietly if this was how life would always be. Him on one side, the world on the other. Just as he was about to stand and leave, a faint struggle caught his attention. Near the rice stall at the far end of the market, an old man was trying to lift a heavy sack onto his cart. The bag was almost as large as he was, and his arms trembled under its weight. Without thinking twice, Eli jumped to his feet and ran over. "Wait, sir, let me help," he called out. The old man looked up, startled. Before he could protest, Eli grabbed one end of the sack, his small hands gripping tightly. Together they heaved the bag up onto the cart. Eli panted, sweat glistening on his forehead. But when the work was done, he smiled, the same quiet, genuine smile he always carried. The old man studied him for a moment, his eyes filled with surprise and warmth. "Thank you, son," he said, his voice gentle and sincere. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small coin. "Here, take this, you've earned it." Eli shook his head and took a small step back. "No, sir," he said softly. "You needed help. That's enough." For a moment silence hung between them, a silence filled with respect and quiet understanding. The old man smiled again, this time with a hint of pride. "Bless you, child," he whispered. As Eli walked away, the wind picked up a little, swirling dust around his feet. He still had nothing, no food, no money, but something inside him glowed brighter than before. It wasn't hope given to him. It was hope he had created, one small act of kindness at a time. The morning sun rose again over the village, spilling golden light across rooftops and market stalls. Dew still clung to the grass, glimmering like small drops of glass. The streets slowly came alive, the rhythmic clatter of pots, the chatter of vendors, and the fragrance of fresh bread filling the air. It was a new day, but for Eli it began the same way, barefoot, hungry, and hopeful. He walked through the market, his empty cloth bag swinging gently by his side. The dust from yesterday still clung to his feet, but there was a spark in his step, a quiet determination that had not dimmed, despite rejection. He glanced toward the tea stall where he'd been scolded the day before. The same woman caught his eye and offered him a faint, apologetic smile. Eli smiled back, forgiving her without a word. That was just who he was. As he moved through the crowd, a familiar voice called out from behind a row of rice sacks. "Boy." Eli turned. It was the old man he had helped the previous day, the one with kind eyes and a gentle voice. He was sitting on a wooden crate, his hands resting on his knees. Despite his simple clothes, there was something dignified about him, something Eli hadn't noticed before. "Come, sit with me," the old man said, patting the space beside him. Eli hesitated, unsure if he should, but the man's smile eased his doubt. He sat down quietly. For a few moments they simply watched the market together, people bargaining, children running, birds circling above. The old man spoke first. "You came back," he said with a hint of admiration. Eli nodded. "Yes, sir. I thought, maybe today someone will let me help." The old man chuckled softly. "You remind me of myself when I was your age," he said. "Always chasing work, never losing hope." Eli looked up, curious. "You were poor too?" The man smiled faintly. Poor in money, yes, but never poor in heart. My father used to say kindness costs nothing, but it can buy everything. The words sank deep like seeds planted in dry soil. I think that's true, he said softly. People laugh at me because I don't have shoes. But I think helping others feels better than wearing new ones. The old man looked at him with quiet wonder. Few people, let alone children, spoke with such sincerity. He saw something rare, something he hadn't seen in years. After a long pause, the old man stood up and said, Eli, would you like to work for me? It's nothing grand, just cleaning my storehouse near the end of the market. Eli's eyes widened. Truly? The man nodded. Yes, come with me. They walked together through winding alleys until they reached a small old building behind the shops. Inside were rows of burlap sacks, wooden crates, and dust-covered shelves. It's not much, the man said, but it's honest work. Keep it clean and I'll pay you at the end of the day. Eli didn't need to think twice. I'll do my best, sir, he said eagerly, and he did. For hours he swept the floors, dusted the shelves, and organized the sacks neatly. His bare feet turned gray from the dirt and his small hands grew sore, but he never complained. When the sun began to set and the market's noise softened, the storehouse looked entirely different, clean, ordered, and alive again. The old man returned, his eyes shining with quiet pride. You've done more than I expected, he said, placing a few coins into Eli's palm. You've earned this. Eli looked down at the coins and the first honest wage he had ever held, and his throat tightened. Thank you, sir, he whispered. This means more than you know, the man smiled. You earned it, son. Remember that? Eli nodded and left for the evening, clutching his coins carefully. He stopped by a small food stall and bought 2 pieces of bread and a banana. For the first time in a long while, he had enough to eat. But as he walked past the alley behind the tea stalls, he noticed a younger boy, smaller than him, sitting alone, his face streaked with dirt and hunger. The boy looked up, startled when Eli approached. Eli crouched down, wordlessly breaking 1 piece of bread in half and handing it to the child. Here, he said. You look hungrier than me. The boy blinked, uncertain, then took it shyly. Thank you. Eli smiled, sitting beside him. Together they ate quietly under the dim light of a flickering street lamp. The bread was dry, but it tasted better than any feast could have because it was shared. From across the street, unseen, the old man watched. He had followed Eli, curious to see what the boy would do with his wages. What he witnessed struck him deeply. The merchant, for that was who he truly was, felt something shift inside his chest. Few knew his secret, that he often disguised himself as a poor trader to test the hearts of those around him. Over the years he had seen greed, deceit, and selfishness. But this barefoot boy, this child who had nothing, had just shared the little he had with another. The merchant's eyes softened. He whispered to himself, kindness costs nothing, and yet it's the richest gift of all. As Eli disappeared down the lane, his silhouette blending into the orange glow of dusk, the merchant knew this boy was different. He was not merely another poor child of the streets. He was proof that goodness could still live in the quiet corners of the world. That night, under a starlit sky, the merchant made a silent promise. This would not be the end of Eli's story. It would be the beginning. The days that followed passed quietly, each one brighter than the last. The market, once indifferent to Eli's presence, now greeted him with curious glances. People had started to notice the small barefoot boy who swept the merchant's storehouse with more pride than others gave to owning shops. Every morning, Eli arrived early, sometimes before the birds began their chatter. He cleaned, carried, sorted, and ran errands without complaint. The merchant, though still dressed as a modest trader, watched him carefully from afar. Each day his admiration for the boy grew. Eli never once asked for more money, more food, or more comfort. He worked with quiet gratitude, humming softly as he swept the floor. When customers stopped by, he greeted them with a smile, his sincerity disarming even the harshest voices. And yet when evening came, he never forgot to share. The small coins he earned often went to others, an old woman needing tea, a hungry child, or a stray dog sniffing for scraps. The merchant saw it all, hidden behind his store window, and every time, the corners of his mouth lifted in a silent smile. Then one morning, as the golden light spilled across the market square, the merchant called out, Eli, come here, my boy. Eli quickly set down the broom and wiped his dusty hands on his shorts. Yes, sir? The merchant's tone was warm, his eyes twinkling with something unspoken. Come with me, he said, leading him toward the back of the storehouse, a place Eli had never been before. On a wooden table lay a small box, neatly wrapped in brown paper and tied with a string. The merchant placed his hand gently on it. This, he said, is for you. Eli blinked in surprise. For me? The merchant nodded. Go on. Open it. Eli hesitated, his hands trembling slightly as he untied the string. The paper crinkled softly beneath his fingers. When he lifted the lid, his breath caught. Inside lay a pair of shoes. Not just any shoes. They were new, sturdy, shining in the morning light. Their leather gleamed, their laces neatly tied. They looked impossibly perfect beside Eli's calloused, dusty feet. For a long moment Eli said nothing. His lips parted, but no words came. Then his eyes filled with tears, his chest rising and falling with emotion he couldn't contain. No one's ever given me something like this, he whispered, his voice shaking. The merchant smiled, his gaze soft but steady. They're not just shoes, boy, he said. They're a beginning. Eli lifted them carefully as though they were made of glass. The smell of fresh leather filled his nose, the cool touch of the material foreign yet comforting. He hugged the shoes to his chest, then knelt down, bowing his head in gratitude. Thank you, sir, he murmured. But I can't repay you. The merchant reached forward and gently lifted the boy's chin. You already did, he said kindly. When you helped me that day, when you refused my coin, you gave me something I hadn't seen in years, a pure heart. Eli looked up, tears glistening on his cheeks. The merchant placed a hand on his shoulder. You reminded me that kindness still exists in this world. That is worth far more than any payment. By now, a few nearby vendors had stopped their work, noticing the scene unfolding in the shop doorway. Word spread quickly, and the poor barefoot boy, the merchant, the mysterious gift. One by one, people gathered around, curious and silent. Eli slowly slipped his feet into the shoes. They fit perfectly, as though made just for him. He stood up, taking a few steps, his reflection glinting faintly in the polished surface. The crowd watched in stillness. Some smiled. Others lowered their eyes, ashamed. The fruit seller who had once mocked him looked down, guilt washing over his face. The woman from the tea stall wiped a tear from her cheek. The market, which had once laughed at him, now watched with awe as the barefoot boy took his first proud steps in his first pair of shoes. The merchant turned to the onlookers and spoke with quiet authority. You see, it costs nothing to be kind, yet it can change everything. The crowd remained silent, his words hanging heavy in the air. A few nodded, a few smiled, and for the first time, even the loudest corners of the market seemed to soften. Eli turned to the merchant. I'll take care of them, he said earnestly, looking down at the shoes. I'll never let them get dirty, the merchant chuckled. They're meant to get dirty, my boy. Shoes are for walking, for chasing dreams. He paused for a moment, then continued, his tone deepening. Eli, I have one more thing to ask of you. Yes, sir? The merchant looked him in the eyes. I want you to stay with me. Work in my shop. Learn. I'll teach you everything I know about trade, honesty, and life. You'll have food, a place to sleep, and a future. Would you like that? Eli's mouth fell open. You mean, you want me to be your helper? Not just my helper, the merchant said, smiling. My apprentice. Eli's eyes widened in disbelief. He looked down at the shoes again as though they were a dream he might wake from. Then slowly he nodded, once firmly, his eyes shining brighter than the shoes themselves. I'll do my best, sir, he said softly. I know you will, the merchant replied. The market erupted in quiet murmurs. Some clapped, some smiled through tears, others simply stood in silence watching the moment unfold. The same streets that had once ignored Eli now seemed to bend around him, as though recognizing something sacred had just taken place. The merchant placed his arm gently around the boy's shoulders and led him into the shop. Together they walked past the rows of goods and golden light filtering through the windows. The old man steady, the boy eager, his shoes tapping softly against the wooden floor. Outside, life went on, the market returning to its usual chaos. But something in the air had changed. The gossip was quieter, the laughter kinder, and the faces gentler. because everyone had seen what true wealth looked like that day. Not in gold or goods, but in a heart that gave even when it had nothing left to give. The months passed quietly, like pages turning in a book only a few noticed. Each dawn found Eli at the merchant's shop, broom in hand, sleeves rolled up, determination shining in his eyes. But he was no longer just a boy cleaning floors. Now openly known to him as Master Rafiq, became both teacher and guardian. He taught Eli how to measure rice and lentils by weight, how to calculate profit and loss, and how to treat customers with fairness and respect. More importantly, he taught him the unspoken lessons of life: humility, patience, and the art of giving more than one takes. Under Rafiq's guidance, Eli's rough edges softened. He learned to read simple numbers than words. His voice grew more confident, his smile steadier. Though still young, he carried himself with quiet dignity. The boy who once walked barefoot through dust now walked with purpose. Yet despite his new shoes and clean clothes, he never forgot where he came from. He still paused to share his meal with the hungry, still greeted the vendors with the same humble bow of the head. The market, too, had changed. People spoke kindly to him now, some out of respect, others out of guilt. The same fruit seller who once mocked his bare feet now offered him fresh fruit every morning. The tea stall owner nodded in quiet shame whenever their eyes met, but Eli never held grudges. He had learned something greater than pride: the power of forgiveness. One bright morning, months after his first day of work, Rafiq handed Eli a list and some coins. "Go to the market square," he said. "Buy these for the shop. And take your time. Today you trade on your own." Eli's face lit up with excitement. It was his first time managing the purchases by himself. He tucked the coins safely in his pocket, tied the list in his hand, and set off toward the bustling marketplace, the same one that had once turned him away. The streets were alive as ever: the laughter of vendors, the aroma of tea and spices, the color of fruits shining under the sun. But as Eli walked, a strange calm filled him. Every corner, every sound carried a memory of hunger, of rejection, of his younger self searching for hope. He passed the old neem tree where he had once sat with an empty bag and an empty stomach. He smiled softly at the memory. The dust that once clung to his feet was gone, but the lessons it taught him remained. Then, as he turned a corner, he saw him, a small boy no older than 8, sitting by the roadside. His hair was messy, his clothes torn, and his feet bare. He stared at the ground, clutching an empty sack just as Eli once had. Eli stopped. For a moment the world fell silent. The sounds of the market faded to a distant hum as he stared at the reflection of his own past sitting before him. Without a word, he walked over and knelt down in front of the child. The boy looked up, startled, his eyes wide and frightened. Eli smiled gently. "Are you looking for work?" The boy nodded timidly. Eli glanced down at his own shoes, sturdy, well-worn, polished by many walks. Then without hesitation he untied them. The boy watched in confusion as Eli slipped them off and placed them beside the child's feet. "Here," Eli said softly. "They'll fit you better than they fit me." The boy's lips trembled. "But they're yours." Eli shook his head. "They were once given to me, when I had nothing. Now it's my turn." For a heartbeat the market stood still. People who had known Eli, who had seen his journey, paused in silence. Even the fruit seller lowered his basket. The woman from the tea stall covered her mouth, tears forming in her eyes. Eli gently helped the boy slide his feet into the shoes. They fit perfectly, just as they once had for him. The boy looked down, then up again, unable to speak. Eli smiled. "Walk proudly. The road is yours now." From across the market, Rafiq stood quietly, watching the scene unfold. His hands rested behind his back, his eyes glimmering with pride and emotion. He didn't speak for a long time. He didn't need to. The moment spoke for itself. But when Eli finally looked up and saw him standing there, Rafiq stepped forward, his voice deep and gentle. "Now," he said softly, "you truly understand what gold means." Eli's brow furrowed slightly. "Gold, sir?" Rafiq nodded, smiling. "Gold is not the metal we sell or the coins we earn. It's the heart that gives unfreely, selflessly, without counting the cost. You've learned that today." Eli bowed his head, overwhelmed. The young boy he had helped clutched his hands tightly, refusing to let go. Around them, the market seemed to breathe differently, lighter, kinder. The same ground that once carried the footsteps of a barefoot beggar now bore the legacy of a giver. And as the sun climbed higher, bathing them all in its golden light, Eli realized that the merchant had been right all along. Kindness truly costs nothing, yet it makes the soul immeasurably rich. Years rolled by like gentle waves upon the shore. The once barefoot boy of the market had long grown into a man, tall, kind-eyed, and steady in his walk. Eli, now in his 20s, was no longer a helper or an apprentice. He was the proud owner of his own shop, a humble but thriving place known throughout the village for its fairness, honesty, and heart. His store stood near the very center of the market where his story had begun. The wooden sign above the door read simply, "Eli's Goods and Grains," but it wasn't the name that made people come. It was Eli himself. He greeted every customer with a warm smile and a respectful nod. He never raised his voice, never cheated in measure, and never turned away anyone who came hungry or empty-handed. Children loved to linger near his counter, knowing he would always hand them a small sweet or a slice of fruit. The elderly stopped by not just to buy rice or flour, but to talk, for in Eli's shop everyone felt seen. Everyone belonged. Behind the counter, nailed carefully to the wall, hung a single framed picture, old, faded, but lovingly kept. Inside the frame was a pair of worn-out shoes. Their soles were cracked, their leather dulled with age, but to Eli they gleamed brighter than gold. Customers often asked about them. "Why do you keep those old shoes, sir? Surely you can afford a new pair to display." Eli would pause, look at the frame with a soft smile, and reply, "These shoes taught me that wealth is not in what you wear, but in what you share." And every time he said it, his voice carried the quiet strength of a truth deeply lived. He never forgot Master Rafik, the man who had changed his life. Though Rafik had grown older and frailer, his eyes still sparkled with wisdom whenever Eli visited him. They often sat together under the same banyan tree by the tea stall, the place where kindness had first bloomed between them. Rafik would watch the people passing by, the bustling market now cleaner, happier, more compassionate than before. "You've done well, my boy," he would say, pride softening his voice. Eli would smile. "I only did what you taught me, master, to give more than I take." The merchant would laugh gently. "Ah, no, Eli, you taught me what gold truly means." As the years went on, Eli quietly carried forward his teacher's spirit. When he saw a hungry child, he fed them. When he saw a poor worker, he offered them a fair day's pay. He trained young apprentices the way Rafik once trained him, not only in trade but in kindness. And every so often, when a struggling soul walked into his shop barefoot and uncertain, Eli's heart would remember. Sometimes he would take out a box from beneath his counter, a box filled not with money but with shoes, pairs of all sizes, neatly arranged. And as he handed one to a child in need, he would say softly, "Go on, wear them, walk forward. These are not just shoes, they're a beginning." And so, the cycle continued, from one heart to another, from one act of kindness to the next. One evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the market in a warm amber glow, the camera of life pulled back slowly. We see Eli standing at the doorway of his shop, smiling as children run past, their laughter echoing through the same streets that once knew his hunger. Vendors call out cheerfully. The scent of tea and roasted corn fills the air again.